We are back. Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm PJ and this is JP. Often mixed up on both counts, I'm pretty sure, as you take a wee sip out your Jaws mug. Classic movie. Are we allowed to talk about movies and music today? I think
Probably
so.
not, no.
We're going to do it anyway. There is plenty to discuss today, JP. And let's dive right in. Topic number one, Celtic's number one, because we were actually at the press conference yesterday, represented by Mr. Anthony Haggerty, talking to the new goalie. Signed up on a 4-year deal from Dundee United. One of the guys, I'm sure most people will agree, an absolute standout. You know how, remember we signed Johnny Hayes and he was probably the best player outside our own squad in Scottish football. Siegrist is a wee bit like that, I think. He was one of the guys that always stood out, JP. The rumour has been circulating for a couple of weeks. He's penned the deal. But where does that leave us with goalies? Because I was looking at this. Joe Hart, Benjamin Siegrist, Scott Bain. We've got Connor Hazard and Barkas out on loan. And we've got Toby Oluwayemi. So we've actually still got 6 goalies on the books. And that's after Ross Doohan and Ryan Mullen have been released. So we've got a plethora of goalies. I don't think anybody's in any doubt. He's been given a number one. Joe Hart is the number one. What's the pecking order for you now?
I mean, you'd imagine it's got to be Siegrist after Hart, but yeah, like you say, he's always been that kind of guy. You know, whenever you go to play Dundee United, specifically at Tannadice, you're always like, oh well, they've got a good goalie. You know, like, that's the first thing that comes into your mind. You're like, it's going to be a hard game or a harder game. Mm-hmm. Although we made a mockery of that last season when we took 3 off them at Tannadice.
Yeah,
didn't do anything about that. So, I've obviously not seen a lot of them outside the outside the Dundee United Celtic games. But you know, he is well respected. There was other clubs in for him, whether one of them was Rangers or not, who knows? I'm just glad we've got somebody else that I wouldn't be worried about him being in goals for Celtic. You know,
that's the big thing. That is the big thing.
I just from the little I've seen of him, I think he's a good keeper. So, and obviously going back to things that we said before about Ange Postecoglou's signings, he's not really got a lot wrong yet, has he?
No, you're right. So spot on. I mean, I think back ironically against Dundee United, where Joe Hart very early in the game, remember he had that strange. Seemingly an injury, but he managed to do a number of stretches and he stayed on the park. And I think there was a European game coming up that midweek as well. When you're looking at that situation, JP, going back to what you said there, thinking I'm not confident in having Scott Bain, but we're in a situation in the league where we could not drop a point. I mean, Ange has reiterated that since, saying that from match day 7, we had to go on this run. We had to, we really couldn't blink. We had to go on this run. And you're looking at that game at Dundee United at home and thinking, if Joe Hart's out here, it really could put a span on the works. I just didn't have that faith in Scott Bain. Do you think that's unfair? I mean, it seems that Ange likes him. He's been given a new deal himself last year for 4 years. So is it unfair of me to say that? I do remember a very good performance at Ibrox that Scott Bain had. But I don't know if it's because of last 2 seasons ago, maybe skewing my view of the goalkeeper scenario and all the goalies who were there at the time. Is Scott Bain a decent backup? Are we being a bit unfair on him?
I don't think he's a bad keeper. I mean, I remember Scott Bain, you know, in the times before Celtic, you know, when he was at other clubs, I always thought he was a good keeper. You know, like a song started for him at Alloa, you know, Carly Simon, "You're So Vain," you know, "You're Scott Bain." I don't know. I'm not casting aspersions on him whether he's a vain guy or whatever. But I saw him last week. I didn't do a Declan and go up and bother him for a picture or anything. It was outside one of Declan's haunts, Usabi Delhi, with Tom Rogic and Ryan Christie actually. Yeah, they were hanging out. I think Scott Bain maybe being number one for Celtic is a bit far-fetched to think, but I don't think he's a bad keeper. I guess it's up to him whether or not he wants to be a squad member at Celtic or a first-team player, because he clearly could be a first-team keeper somewhere else, either in Scotland or maybe Championship or something like that, because he is a good keeper. But he clearly likes the environment at Celtic, and he's comfortable and no doubt well compensated. So
seems a popular member of the team as well, JP.
Definitely, it would seem that way. Yeah, just from seeing that last week, I'm hanging out with Rogic and Christie, although both of them now are ex-Celtic players, which is quite mad to think. You still think of them as being Celtic players.
I know. And I've said before, I think Christie would have really flourished under Ange. But I'm thinking also to the situation we were in, remember, with Zaluska coming in from Dundee United. He'd really, really impressed, similar to Siegrist, really impressed. He came in, I mean, listen, I might be wrong, but I bet he played about 20 games in something like 4 or 5 seasons. And some goalkeepers are quite happy to do that, JP, to be that backup, knowing that, at the end of their career, because they're not getting the same rigours week in, week out, they will probably extend their career at the end of their career. They play into their 40s a lot of the time as well. I don't think Siegrist has that attitude. I really don't think he's got that view. I found it interesting that he worked with Martin O'Neill at Aston Villa as well in his earlier career. And I just think he probably is an ambitious goalkeeper. But listen to the podcast, because we'll fire it out tonight on all the audio channels, actually. We'll probably put it up on YouTube as well, where the fan media representatives were able to speak to Ben or Benji.
It's Ben now, isn't it? It's Ben. He's changed his name, since signing for
Who else has done that, right? So we've had Mark Viduka, previously Marco. I get why he did that, obviously, when you look at his background in that as well. But who else has done it? There's been a few. Remember, Andy Cole became Andrew Cole.
Yeah, and then released a single as Andrew Cole. I can't remember if he changed his name for that. Have you ever heard Andy Cole's single?
I have not.
Me and my mate Michael, we often sing it at each other in a jovial way. It's called Outstanding. I think it's a cover, but it's him sitting in the back of a limo, sort of rapping. It's up there with some of the worst football crossover singles. Not that we're allowed to talk about music, but yeah.
But we're going to anyway, because you've sparked a few wee images in my mind here about that crossover. And sometimes you think to yourself, did that happen? And then you furiously search on YouTube to find it. And I'm now thinking about Ian Wright being on stage at Top of the Pops with Prince Nassim Hamid, and the pair of them were singing. Did that happen, or am I making that up?
I didn't know that. I do know the Glenn Hoddle one happened, which is that's absolutely.
Was that with Chris Waddle? Hoddle and Waddle?
I've got to find out. Why do I think Kevin Keegan was involved with that as well? I don't know, but I know Glenn Hoddle was with a mullet, and it's just pure 80s out of its nut. It's good.
Oh my words! But listen, there is a connection, because there is going to be a huge announcement very soon from Acsom. I can't say anything at the moment because we need to speak to a few people, but it might just involve Celtic. It might just involve music. I think back to the centenary year when we released the Celtic Rap. Did anybody get that on a 7-inch? I remember buying that at Falkirk Market that used to take place behind the Coasters ice rink.
Coasters, yeah.
I bought that 7-inch. It was a terrible song.
I didn't have it, but I had it on a Hail Hail Celtic compilation of assorted Celtic songs. Probably still got it, actually. It'll be... there it's there.
Wow. And the Celtic Rap is on it?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's on it. As is Hampden in the Sun, Celtic Are Here, a classic. Do you remember that one?
Celtic Are Here. Was that another?
Celtic Are Here, Celtic Are Here. I can't believe I'm singing on here. It's a belter. That's the CD anyway. There you go. Hail Hail Celtic. I bet you loads of folk have got that.
Was that an official one, JP, or was it one of your kind of Barra's purchases?
No, it's on an official label, Cherry Red. Oh no, it says at the bottom, this product is not official merchandise of Glasgow Celtic FC. So, but the Celtic Rap is on it, and I can only remember that one line. He's Frank McAvenny, and you know he's going to score.
It was terrible.
At football, I would imagine.
Well, that's up for interpretation. I always remember on the back of the record as well, there was pictures of them, the obligatory pictures of the guys in the studio. and they're all wearing like dreadful shell suits and all that with their hats sideways, which automatically makes them rappers, clearly. You know what I mean? And obviously the Anfield rap that was a massive success about a year or two before that as well. Anyway, let us digress a wee bit. I want to bring in some of the comments coming in. Paddy Lavery, brilliant to see you as always, my friend. Afternoon all from a lovely sunny Ardoyne. I'm glad it's sunny. It had to be good weather this morning because I was sitting in a traffic jam for the best part of 3 hours trying to get to Dalkeith because of the Royal Highland Show. So is there another route I can take? Because if so, I'll be taking it tomorrow. Paddy, good to see JP back. Yeah, you're always missed. People ask what's happening with JP if you're not on. And we've also got a comment coming in from Ryan Kelly. Thanks for joining us on the show as well. And a wintry Australia, so you're not getting the sunshine in your part of Australia. Kookaburra, thanks for joining us. And the Urban Culture, good day to all my Acsom friends and enemies. Wow.
Plenty of them, jeez.
Oh, and we don't get us started. Joe Hart, yeah, he's a number one. I'm pretty sure Segrist will be pushing for number two. Talking of number twos, we need to talk about Juranovic because Monday I was being accused of jinxing it and hexing it and all that kind of stuff because you put out a podcast with all the best intentions saying, look at us, man. Celtic are approaching things differently, JP. We're not selling any of our top assets. We're actually going to go into this season number 2 under Ange fully equipped with the same nucleus of the team. We're not worrying about losing an Ayer or an Eddie or a Christie, as you've mentioned them. Somebody says to me, but we never lost any players when we were going for the 10. The player that we lost going for the 10 was Frimpong, if you remember. He left during the season as well. Juranovic, yes, as much as we love Tony Ralston, Juranovic is a really classy international standard player. But a rumour was kind of spreading through Twitter. And it was started by some guy called Fabrizio Romano. But I think that Axom's kind of like trumped him because it's not came to anything, JP. What did you make of that coming out? I'm tongue-in-cheek, by the way, if you think I'm going toe-to-toe with Fabrizio Romano. I'd love to see his phone book. No, but he is. This is the thing. I was actually, when I saw it, I thought, oh, no. Because when he says it, it normally happens. What did you make of all that?
Well, the first thing I thought was that it was somebody had created a fake Fabrizio Romano Twitter and just, because it's easy done, isn't it? I mean, they could do that with the sort of finite wee things that you can do to just make it look real. But when you clicked on it, you're like, all right, that is actually Fabrizio Romano, and there's not much that he has got wrong. And as soon as you see that kind of let's go patter, that he's probably right, and I don't know. He's obviously got it from somewhere, and there must be interest. It would be crazy if there wasn't interest. He's a Croatian international. He's had a good season. He's made an impact. He's showed what he can do on these shores. There's probably a bit more of a spotlight on Celtic and Scottish football than there is on Polish football. No disrespect to Polish football. Obviously, I have Polish heritage, but I think he's obviously showcased his talents here, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's English clubs interested. But there's a difference between being interested and he's going to leave, So it's a bit of a leap to get there. But again, he doesn't tend to put things out that don't have foundation. So I don't know. We'll wait and see what happens. I mean, I've got to become really fond of the guy. I think he's an infectious character. He looks like he's a nice guy, sound guy. Mm-hmm. Again, fits in with the Ange Postecoglou signing sound folk as opposed to folk that are going to be bother. He doesn't look like he's going to be bother. He looks like he's enjoying it at Celtic. Not many other places you can go where a right back is going to get a song sang by the whole stadium, and it doesn't even really feel like he's got going at Celtic yet. I mean, I know
what you mean. I agree with that.
I know we've had him for a season, but it doesn't. It doesn't feel like it felt like he was missing for quite a while when he was missing.
Yeah,
and I can't even remember how long he was out, but it felt like a good few months or whatever,
And then when he was fit, often he wasn't playing at right back because it would have been a scandal at that point to drop Tony Ralston. So he filled in at left back. And I get what you mean with that. He's one of the guys I want to see full pre-season under his belt, JP. And then, getting a full run at it. Because I reckon he's the type of guy who could play 40 games in a season, 40, 50 games. And I'd love to see how he progresses. I certainly didn't want, after our great positivity on Monday for one of our star performers, and I think he is up in that bracket, to believe in. But we ran a YouTube poll during the show the following day after the Romano rumour and the gossip, saying that because the quoted fee that I had seen was 15 million. And I thought to myself, no. When you've got a guy tied down, I think, to a 4-year deal, as Juranovic is, that's only going to increase with the international kind of standard that he's at and performing at. And then you look at next season, you look at the fact that you then, again, take that to another level. If you have a decent Champions League campaign, if you perform individually on the Champions League stage, for 15 million, no, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be accepting that. And we put it out, and I think 70% of the Celtic fans who were watching that day voted no, they wouldn't take 15 million. I mean, that was another thing that surprised me, and I don't know if that was just a figure plucked out of the air, JP, but I don't think we sell our star asset under these circumstances for 15, and I know Eddie and Ayer went for roughly that, just under 15. But we were in a completely different scenario with those players, and the football world was still in a state of flux coming out of the pandemic. The financial situation, which obviously Celtic have kind of alleviated any concerns about that with an announcement to the stock exchange yesterday, I think it was. But at that time, I don't think Ayer was worth 14. I think he was worth more than that. Same with Eddie. But because of the timing of it, 15 million would be an absolute steal if somebody bought Juranovic for that, wouldn't it?
Well, I get rubbished on here probably a year and a half, 2 years, about a year and a half ago, and I said Ayer was, in my mind, based on his abilities and everything else and what I could see, and based on the transfer market, was a £25 million player. And people were like, what are you taking? That's nonsense. Mm-hmm. He's been linked with a move to Everton. You're trying to say Everton are only going to pay in and around that sort of money for him to get him from another Premiership club. I mean, you could see the way that his career trajectory had gone, that he was going to end up being a player in that bracket. Whether you think he can defend or not, whether you think he's got, a heart or not, I think he has. I think he always ran himself into the ground for Celtic. You always saw him, remember him celebrating winning tackles in the box and things like that. I mean, that I love that. So, but Juranovic at 15 million, it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the transfers we've seen. Whether or not they think it's because he's not played in the Champions League or not, and they don't, and the valuation is set at, I say set, the rumoured valuation is set at 15 million. But again, it's up to, people will start going, oh, well, it's the Celtic board, and what if Ange wants to keep him and the player wants to stay, but the Celtic board want to sell him? I mean, that's a pie in the sky scenario. We don't know what's going on. We don't know. I wouldn't have thought that the Celtic board would sell a player that didn't want to leave and that the manager didn't want to leave. I wouldn't have thought that would happen, regardless of fee at the moment anyway.
The thing on Monday, that was maybe the wider kind of conversation, JP, was if this was going to happen. I mean, I never knew about Juranovic on Monday. The gossip came later in the night. But if someone was to be sold for that, the quick turnaround and profit under the gaffer's nose, it would spell absolute danger. It can't happen. We've got to keep this team and the momentum that Ange is building together. We can't annoy or pull the rug from under his feet at any point. There's a couple of discussion points today where that comes up again, JP, so I totally get that. If the board were to do that, then, all this focus and everything that's on Ange and the team and the positivity, the spotlight just goes like that, right back onto the board again, if they do something of that nature. So let's hope. I don't know if people are into mischief making, I really don't, but there seems to be no substance to the rumours that came on Monday. So yeah, Acsom did trump Fabrizio Romano this week, and I'm taking that one, JP. I'm going to take that one every single day of the week. Wee Jimmy, Jaws was on telly last Saturday night. Still quality, yeah. One of the best
film of all time.
Unbelievable.
It's my favourite film of all time. There's no doubt about it.
There's a scene. It's the scene where, the famous scene where he's telling the story about, the Sharks taking all these men out and all the rest of it, and he survived it. Unbelievable cinematic moment. Absolutely love that film.
And improvised as well, by the way.
Is that right?
Robert Shaw had a script to do that. Came, did the shot, did the set, and then wasn't happy with what they'd done. So he came back the next day, half cut, and did the scene, and did it kind of improvised, and there was just like a hushed silence in the set, and everyone just, then they went cut, and everyone just went, wow. Okay, that's we're keeping that in. So
the thing is, if anybody's wondering why we're talking about Jaws, we're looking at people that are kind of circling Celtic at the moment, and they're almost like bloodthirsty sharks looking at all our best players. So there's your link, all right? And that's how we're speaking about Jaws. The Urban Culture. Mick Lynch must get the Paradise Windfall gig. Oh, yes. Mick Lynch, he has been outstanding this weekend. I've got to say, this is personal. Everybody is open to their own opinion and view on this. I completely support the strike action that him and his people are taking. Coming from JP, a family who were on strike 1984 to 1985. My old man was a striking miner. There's actually a tremendous picture, right? And he claims it wasn't him, because obviously there was like picket action, and there was the infamous Battle of Orgreave. He claims this wasn't him, but I found this image, and I'll tell you what, right? This is my old man's double. Even the hairdo remains the same. Let's see if I can bring it up here. This is an absolute cracker of a picture, right? I'm sure this is my old man with the blood pouring out his head. It is his spitting image. He's still got that hairdo as well. Never changed. A bit like me, keeps the same hairdo for about 30 years, JP. So there you go. Yeah, solidarity with these people who are trying to get a better deal for the working class, basically. We're looking at the number 3 position now. We've gone through number 1 and 2, but before I go on to number 3, talking to number 2s, talking to famous and legendary number 2s, Danny McGrain, the one, the only. One of the players, JP, everybody knows his full name, Daniel Fergus McGrain. It's like Charles Patrick Tully. You know what I mean? There's certain players, James Edward McGrory, we know their full names for some reason, their legendary status. Danny will be at the penalty spot this Saturday between 12 and 2 o'clock. That's in Sword Street in Glasgow. Get yourself down there, see Danny, get the stuff signed, and meet a living legend in Danny McGrain, who could also play left back as well. So let's have a wee chat about left backs, because it looks as though we are in the market. The next person to join the Ange Revolution will be an Argentinian, hence the jersey over your shoulder. And it looks as though Bernabei, if you pronounce it that way, is on his way. What's your thoughts? Have you seen much of the player? I've seen quite a lot of comments from fans of his current club saying that he's great offensively, needs to work on his defensive play.
Right. No, I haven't watched any highlights reels or anything. I kind of stopped doing that a while ago, just because we've been burned so many times by, very well put together highlights reels of players that come and then, you only need to look at a certain player that was on loan at another club in Glasgow last season who put together a highlights reel of a draw at Dingwall. So, you can make yourself look good in a highlights reel. It's what you do when you come to a new club. And I'm kind of surprised that he's going to be the first Argentinian if we do sign him. It looks like that is going to happen. I saw the video of him saying his farewells in the dressing room. But it's quite surprising that he's the first Argentinian that will ever play for Celtic. That's quite an accolade. And it's exciting to get somebody from that part of the world. Like I say, I don't know that much about him, but it's clear we need somebody on the left-hand side, especially with Scales going to Aberdeen. He's obviously not been considered for the first team at this point, so we'll see what Bernabei does.
Yeah, and we will talk about Scales as well, because I think there's a few questions to be raised there. Maybe not negatively, by the way, but there's definitely a few questions to be raised in relation to what we're going to get out of that deal, because there's no option to buy on Liam Scales. I find that really interesting as well. JP,
which the Aberdeen fans were raging about. I read their comments in the tweet, and they're just like, developing another player for Celtic and all that stuff, and they weren't happy at all, and they're like, Christie all over again and all this sort of stuff, and you're like,
I get that, by the way. I do get that. I get that frustration. Yeah,
I know. I do get it. Obviously, there was then the same, frustration from Dundee United fans who were annoyed that Siegrist was coming to Celtic to potentially effectively be on the bench. Mm-hmm. Time will tell whether or not that is the case. But yeah, the Aberdeen fans weren't happy about Scales not having the option to buy, because I think he probably will do all right for them. Actually, I think if he gets a run of games in a team, like, obviously it depends who else Jim Goodwin buys to complement, the squad in the summer. But I think I saw enough of him. I mean, he gets a lot of stick for the Bodo Glimt game. The whole team didn't play well in that game. I think it's wrong to single out Scales, especially as he just came in, cold into that game, like literally cold, because it was freezing at that game. And I wish him well. Hope he does all right up there. And he can't play against us, which is another thing that they were annoyed about.
Well, see, this is a big thing as well, selfishly, because I'm only interested in Celtic. We had a few discussions last season, JP, about, when you've got a bloated squad, get as many players out as possible to fellow Premiership teams. And I know it's easier said than done, but if that is kind of your remit and you're part of the recruitment team at Celtic in terms of dealing with players that are going to be loaned out, then you should be pushing for that, because it's an absolute win-win for Celtic. I mean, you are strengthening an opponent against your rivals. You're not strengthening them against yourselves. And, it could be something as simple as half a dozen players, because we do have a surplus of players, right? Half a dozen players playing for Motherwell or Aberdeen, Hibs, etc., etc. And I know their fans might think, well, why do we want your dregs? I'm not that interested in that. Liam Scales will probably play, I think, regularly from what I've seen in that Aberdeen side, because, they weren't any great shakes last season, JP. And I'm liking the fact, and I've spoken about the loan system and how we're probably using it to our advantage more than we have in the past in terms of bringing players in. And I think we can also do that with putting players out. Strengthen other teams who might score a winner. They might have a man of the match performance. You might put a goalkeeper out to another Premiership team and he has a man of the match performance against Rangers one week. You know what? So I like the idea of doing that. Celtic seem to be in control of these deals. Montgomery was the other one that went to Aberdeen, wasn't it? He went to Aberdeen and he's come back.
What's happened with Shaw at Motherwell? I mean, he was at Motherwell. I've not heard anything about him coming back. He must be back at Celtic now, I would have thought.
Yeah, all the talk seems to have been about Urhoghide. We seem to kind of put the two guys in the same category because they came in from Sheffield Wednesday at the same time. And obviously we've been trying to get that deal done to send them off to Belgium. But Shaw, the reports I got from somebody who contributes to another show on the channel, who's a Motherwell fan, is that he was decent. And she would have been pretty happy to keep him. Whether or not that happens, I'm not so sure, because he's not going to be playing for Celtic next season. Shaw, and there's a few others in that bracket as well, who I think we will chat about. Patrick McLaughlin, also talking about Argentina, it brought to mind one of the best Argentina moments in Scottish football, almost. And it was when Dunfermline Athletic brought in Maradona's son on trial. I don't know if you remember this, right? Maradona's son came to Dunfermline Athletic and he was training down at Petrivi training pitches, and there was a whole furore around the fact that we're going to sign this guy. They were going to give him the number 10 jersey and all this kind of stuff, JP. It was just like a proper marketing dream for the Pars. And he ended up, I think, going to a Spanish 5th division side or something. But the Pars were very close to bringing in Maradona's boy just so they could tap into the name. If they had a light blue and white striped away jersey, I'm pretty sure they sold a few copies of that as well. We've got Patrick McLaughlin coming in. Do you think once we piece the jigsaw together, there will be one more big marquee signing at $6 million plus, or is Jota and Carter Vickers it for the big signings? I'm bringing this up because I think it's something that we have been talking about. I don't know how confident you are at the moment, JP, that Jota is going to sign permanently. But if he does, then you're looking at two big or marquee signings coming into the club in the same window. Two massive signings, £6 to £6.5 million each with add-ons as well. And we asked the question a few weeks back, will the board spend something like 25 million, or will we bring in the likes of Siegrist, free agent, and maybe a couple of loan players because we've used the loan market better? Or do you see us actually going out on a limb and bringing in another big marquee signing if we get Jota?
I mean, well, my mate Ryan is obviously quite confident that Jota's going to sign because he's got him on the back of the new black away top. He's got his name and number on the back. So he sent me a picture of it yesterday saying, "Oh, I've jinxed it," and I was like, "Nah, no chance. He's surely going to sign." I mean, every single day it's just like there's a new news outlet posting saying that the Jota deal is on there's just a few more things to get finalised. It's like, right, okay, surely it's gonna happen. If it doesn't happen, it would that be absolutely wild. I think if he didn't.
Pretty devastating, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a really, really strange turn of events to suddenly see him either back at Benfica or paraded in front of another press conference with a new team strip or whatever, signing for somebody else. I don't really see that happening, but I mean, obviously, we've seen that happen many times before. 1989 being the the prime example. I don't think there's any danger of him, heading over to Edmiston Drive at any time soon. But yeah, I mean, we've obviously been burned at the last minute a few times with signings. I mean, were we not almost signing Petric at one point? Gordon Petric,
and then that happened a few times. Even Alan McLaren. Yeah. Remember when McLaren signed for Rangers from Hearts? There were a few, but as you say, the one that cut the deepest was I'm not going to say what I was going to call him. Le Petit Merde, because we're going to have a French theme very soon on this show. So yeah, let's call him that. That was the Not the View title that they gave him, wasn't it?
I know. I think with regards to the big signings, I mean, Postecoglou has said that he understands the model of Celtic. He understands the signing strategy. He knows that, and I don't think he expects to be able to go out and just blow 5-6 million on every position. I think if a player becomes available that he strongly feels will fit the system, you kind of get the feeling that they would probably push the boat out for him. Mm-hmm. But it's not a case of like, oh, we have to sign players of that level all the time, because he's proved in the transfer market that he can get players. Juranovic was what, 2.7 million?
Yeah.
So that alone is a key a key sort of indicator of the players he can sign of a certain level that he trusts and knows will fit into the system. So I wouldn't be too, I mean, we've seen us spend big money on players before that haven't worked out. We spent 5 million on a Yeti and 5 million on Barkas. Those transfer fees, whilst looking good at the time, and you're like, oh wow, we spent 5 million each on two players. I mean, now everybody's just like relieved that Barkas had gone, and I really hope Barkas does well at Utrecht. By the way, I hope he makes a lot of people eat their words a bit, because I don't think he's that bad a keeper. I really can't. I'm not saying I wanted him to stay, because I think psychologically at Celtic it was never going to work after last season. It was just 2 seasons ago. It was just too damaging. But I really don't think all this hologram hands and Poppadom hands and cabbage hands patter, it's just become like it was a pylon really in the end with Barkas.
And we do not like pylons.
You had the occasional person that was going like, oh well, just didn't work out, all the best, big man and all that. But then there was like about 10, 15 other folk going, thank God, gives me nightmares and all that. And I'm like, the guy doesn't give me nightmares. I mean, I don't have nightmares about Barkas because of his performances for Celtic, because we didn't see him enough to have nightmares about him. He only played about 20 games, 20 games or something like that. So it's not as if he had this like really long run in the team and was consistently terrible. I think it was a bit over the top. So
I just look at the fees, and we're not even looking at the wages at this point, and the two transfer fees that you mentioned for Barkas and Ajeti. It's equivalent to about roughly 20,000 season tickets, and the work that it takes to actually get 20,000 guys and girls dedicating their money to a season ticket times 20,000, and we've basically wasted that, because we're not going to get the money back. We might get something back if he plays well for Utrecht. We might get something, but I think in order to get something for a Yeti, we're going to have to do that loan with an option to buy, so he can go and prove himself somewhere else. It's about the only way we'll recoup anything for any of those two players. Postecoglou Junior Malone, one of the best names on YouTube. Never mind Jota, is Jim on the Mora. Jim is having a well-deserved break after his exploits with Bend It Like Bertie. I think there was 15 or 16 dates on the tour. And the guy's an absolute perfectionist as well, JP. So he worked his cell really hard.
I'm so gutted I didn't make it, and I'll give on-air apologies to Jim, but June has been a busy month for me work-wise, and every time I was like, can I go to that date? No, I can't, I'm working a gig. Can I go to that date? No, I can't, I'm working a gig. And it just, I actually started looking into going further afield, if it was possible, but it was just with the trains and everything like that at the moment, I was like, nah, I'm going to have to admit defeat. So hopefully it comes back and does a couple of nights at a bigger venue in Glasgow or something, because it seems the feedback online and everything seemed really great. And I thought that was cool how Des McLean got the blazer.
Oh, no.
That was a nice touch.
It's just class, absolute class. But they guys and the people around them are class. I'll get onto that in a wee minute with regards to the fact that we need to wish Willie Wallace a happy 82nd birthday today. I mean, we need to really remember all of these players from that era who are still with us. So a big happy birthday to Wispy, as he used to be called, who came in as Celtic's record signing. We're talking about signing players. 30 grand, Jockstein signed him for £30,000 for Willie Wallace from Hearts. He was an excellent signing. He is, of course, a Lisbon Lion. And it put me in mind, JP, stop listening to Acsom because he keeps name dropping all the players he thinks he knows. That was a wee bit of feedback I got during the week, so thanks very much for that. Cheers on Twitter. And, positivity. I'm sitting there last night and somebody tweeted me last night. Thank you very much, Alan McGrain tweeted me to say, oh, by the way, I see Celtic Smilers on tonight, and I never even knew that it was on. That's a documentary about Neely Mockin, and it was on the telly last night, and that was bizarre. JP, right? It was bizarre because we made that film back in 2015 and we interviewed something like maybe 25 ex-Celts, and it's everybody. We interviewed players from every decade that Neely was at Celtic. So from the 50s, we spoke to people like Mike Jackson and Big John Fallon, of course, who was at Celtic in the 50s. From the 60s, we spoke to people like Stevie Chalmers and Tommy Callaghan and Bobby Lennox. Davy Hay from the 70s, and it went right through to the 90s, where we spoke to Frank McAvenny and Andy Walker and all that. And obviously, for a Celtic fan to be in the company of these people, JP, was just like a dream come true. You're sitting there like, the cat that got the cream every time you meet one of these guys, and you're actually interviewing them, and it was just tremendous. And then you're really involved in the promotion and the launch and all that. You don't actually get a chance to sit down and enjoy it and actually sit and watch the film. And then we had like a premiere in Glasgow down at the Admiral one night. And again, you're that concerned with everything that's happening that you don't get a chance to watch it. So last night, potentially was the first time I've watched it all the way through. And it was weird because it was on the telly with adverts and all that. And you're thinking, wow, my big forehead, that's another thing that came to light last week. My big forehead on the big screen, superb. And anyway, I thought, I better mention it because I didn't know it was going to be on last night, and it was a privilege to be involved in that. And if you haven't seen it, all you need to do, right, is go onto YouTube, type in Celtic's Smiler, and it is up there for free. The full film is up there for free on somebody's page, and you can watch it. And it's a great wee walk down memory lane for a Celtic icon. And if you want to help us out with that, get onto IMDb and give us a rating, because at the minute it's sitting at 7.4. I think Jaws is sitting at 8.6. So we're not as good as Jaws yet, but we're working on it, JP.
I know I've not seen it myself, but I how dare you as a Celtic fan put together a documentary of such quality that gets screened on a Sky channel. How dare you do that? It's just a despicable thing to be doing as a Celtic fan, and
it's attention. It's all about attention. Strangely enough, before it started, right, this is definitely a left field diversion here. There was a documentary on about the guy who was obsessed with Bjork, and I vaguely remember that back in the 90s, JP, but I never really read up on it. By the way, you should watch that. That was bizarre. David Bradley. One good game I have seen him play, Paul. He's offering us nothing. I think that's about Bain. I think that's about Scott
Okay.
Bain. And the one good game I remember certainly was that game against Rangers. Gary Oliver comes in on the YouTube channel. Seagrist will push Hart for games this year. I hope he does. I mean, I think that's healthy. Hart's at that stage of his career. I know he's a total professional, but you know, when you've got that other goalkeeper breathing down your neck all the time, JP, it could well give you another boost to keep you going for another season or two. We've got Paul McLean coming in. Welcome to the show. A central defensive mid. And that's all the boxes ticked for me. Anyone see Gio goal for Greece? Was that the header? We still talking about that, or has he scored again?
Yeah. I also saw that. Did you see the presentation in his village?
I know, brilliant.
That was amazing. Like
that was
proper amazing. His granddad presenting it. That was great.
I love Greece. I go there as much as I possibly can. I actually love it. I don't know why. And I went to a place called Heraklion, which is where Samaras was born.
Oh,
and so every shop you go in, every bar you go in, every taxi driver, you just talk to him about Samaras, you know what I mean? And they'll tell you he was very, very lazy, but he turned up for the big games, and I'm thinking, wow. That's what they say. He's talking about Greece. Honestly, he turns up for the big games. I'm like, wow, absolutely. Let's talk about Celtic. But I was a big Sammy fan, so I'm not gonna give him a dig. Absolutely not. Paul Cook, afternoon guys. Wow, Thursday already. Nice to see JP back. Love the positivity on the JP front as well. We've been talking about the defensive setup. Chris Julian, I don't know if he's been talking because I never saw a quote, JP, and I always look for direct quotes. But there was a story that broke that he's going to stay and stick around and fight for his place. The big question I would ask is, at his best, and we know that might not be possible, you and I covered the Dundee United game where he was injured way back 2 Novembers ago. Would he get into the team? Would he get a game in between Starfelt and Carter Vickers?
Well, not. I think everybody was of the mind that if Carter Vickers didn't sign, then there would be more of an opportunity for Julian. But how could you possibly break up such a successful pairing at the back who had the best defensive record in the league? I mean, I don't think there's any way that surely Julian could have thought that he could have come just straight back from injury and play his way into a side that was, on a roll, was a winning machine. Didn't really drop points barely at all after September. It was minimal. It was like St Mirren and Hibs are the two really ones that I can remember. Everything else were wins. So he, and obviously Dundee United last day of the season, but that was mathematical at that point. But I don't. If he was bumping his gums about not getting more of an opportunity, then I would be a bit concerned about his attitude. But there's nothing to say that he was, other than everyone's picking up of his body language at the trophy celebration. But that, I was thinking about that recently. That could just as easily be somebody that felt a bit sheepish, because you hadn't really contributed. It would be quite weird to be part of these big celebrations when you've played 15 minutes of football.
Well, what's the alternative? Doing a compare? I mean, where do you go? On one end of the scale, you've got compare bouncing about, because he's won a treble, like he was part of it. And then on the other side, you've got Julian, maybe, like you say, thinking, God, I wish I was part of it.
Yeah, and it would be. I mean, it would be a reminder to him of the fact that he's been out injured for such a long period of time. And I mean, that is a long period of time for a footballer. I would have thought it'd be terrible to be out for that length of time and not be able to contribute. And it was just as well we won the league and we were doing well, because otherwise he would have probably felt, I could have done something to help the team. But if he wants to stay and the manager wants him to stay, I've got no issue with that. It's the exact same as Juranovic. If Juranovic wants to, I mean, that's the other big thing. If Juranovic does want to leave, then it's about getting the best fee for him, unfortunately. Because, as we've seen before, we don't want to keep players that don't want to be at the club because it causes problems. And if you've already got other problems, i.e., folk going down with COVID and all sorts of no fans and everything else, to have then 2 or 3 players in that dressing room that don't want to be there, you don't want that causing issues. So there's no point in keeping somebody, no matter how much of a fan's favourite he is. If behind closed doors he's intimated that he wants to leave, then I was going to say that earlier on. Then there's nothing really we could and should be doing other than getting the best fee, I would have thought. But Julian's got a year left in his deal, so I mean, it might just be that he stays for another season and is, you know, I don't think he's bad backup to have, you know, and or there's no way we'd be so fortunate to go through a season without one of the two of those guys getting injured or picking up a suspension or something. And then it's about what Julian does if he gets an in and he's fit and he gets an in, then what he does at that point.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if I think about Julian and Welsh as backups, I'm pretty happy with that. And I know some people say, you know, Welsh, we need an upgrade. As a backup, seriously, I think, you know, I'd much rather a Stephen Welsh than play near Beaton out of position, which won't be happening next season, thankfully. But you're right about just that one bad influence. It is where the bad apple saying comes from. You get a bit of rotten fruit, stick it in a fruit bowl with fresh fruit, and it spreads. And that's exactly what happens. And, you know, there was rumours that that happened in Lenny's last season about, you know, cliques developing and all that kind of stuff. We've seen it at football clubs before. So if someone's not happy, I go back to something I remember Tommy Burns saying, and it was actually around the John Collins departure, where he says, I only want players here who want to play for Celtic. It doesn't matter how good they are, because I was a massive Collins fan. I thought he was brilliant back then. And but if you don't want to play for the club, it's time to go. And actually, now that I've mentioned Burns and we're talking about marquee signings and not always working, remember the changing dynamic when we brought Di Canio to Celtic. Now, politics aside, in terms of the player and the entertainment value and all that, a very, very talented footballer, JP, but he didn't play for a successful, easy for me to say, a successful Celtic side. He came into a side that had gone through an entire league campaign and only lost one game to Rangers 2-0 at Celtic Park. Alec Cleland and Paul Gascoigne scoring the goals, temporary stands and all that kind of stuff. And that was the only game we lost that season. The following season wasn't as memorable, and that was the season that Di Canio came in. So sometimes you add someone to a team and the whole dynamic changes. Whereas I think if you look at the signing policy that Ange has had so far, right, we've had a couple of £4 to £4.5 million buys in Starfelt and Kyogo. We've then had Juranovic under 3 million, and then a whole load of players under 2 million, from Hart to Hatate to Maeda and O'Reilly, and you know. So I think that the way he's going about his business, the only reason we're calling Carter Vickers a marquee signing is because what he done last season. If we signed him a year ago on a permanent, he wouldn't be a marquee signing, he'd be a Tottenham reserve, you know. So I'm pretty chuffed with the way that Ange has approached the transfers, and long may it continue. If no one worried about watching Hart, Siegrist juggle the ball around their own box while trying to play passes with Starfelt and CCV, that was one of the small things last season that continually got me concerned, was Joe Hart's tendency to hold on to the ball too long when he had it at his feet. A couple of moments where he plays a blinder, but it's heart and mouth moments quite a bit. And yeah, I'm a wee bit concerned about it, and I hope it is something we can eradicate. And if Siegrist comes in, hopefully we don't have a repeat of that as well. There's a lot of goalkeepers, if you try and change the style of play, JP, it can sometimes affect them with the ball at their feet, particularly Ryan Kelly. Glad I'm not alone in thinking Bain is all right. He agrees with you, JP. I still think it'll be difficult to get game time now, though, especially since Big Benji is in the door. I also think that this time next season we might be looking at the situation completely differently. A year on, you know, Hart's getting that wee bit older. So it's going to be interesting to have two top quality goalies in the squad. Now, I said earlier on that we might have a French theme. What was I talking about, JP? What was I talking about? How is your French anyway?
Pas mal. It's been a while. I did live there for 6 months when I was a student, and my mum had me speaking French probably before English, actually, because she was a Francophile. But I've not had too much opportunity to practice it of late. I was in Nice in the summer of the first year of the pandemic, and that was kind of strange to go back there and see everyone wearing masks and social distancing. It was like a proper reminder that wasn't just in Glasgow. Do you know what I mean? It was all over the world. So yeah. But France is one of my favourite countries, and been glad to visit there with Celtic a couple of times, Paris Saint-Germain and Rennes, and Lyon actually as well, the night that Larsson broke his leg, unfortunately. Well, it was a great trip, but that was a very, very horrible blot on the trip. Really,
definitely.
Really stayed in Hotel Celtic, would you believe it, in Lyon. Nick Wood, the guy that runs the Heriot Watt, or that ran the Heriot Watt, still does, effectively.
JP has dropped out for a moment, and hopefully his signal will return and he will be back on the screen ASAP. Thanks everybody for getting involved. The reason we are talking about France, and I'll let JP do the pronunciation of Don't Leave Me, which was a 1959 song by Belgian singer-songwriter Jack Brel. There is a Celtic connection, so hopefully once JP comes back in, we can get that Celtic connection. It would be wrong in me to actually steal his thunder, because it is JP's story, and hopefully we will get him back in and he can tell you what is the Celtic connection with Jack Brel. Can anybody guess? I couldn't, but I'm delighted that he shared it with me as well. I'm running solo for the next 10 minutes unless JP comes back in to join me. So what do you think about the discussion points so far in relation to our new goalkeeper, Siegrist? Is he going to push Joe Hart for the number 1 jersey next season? How healthy is that competition? What did you think about the rumours when Juranovic was rumoured to be getting interest from Premiership sides down south? Is it about time we announced Jota? And if we do, would you be happy with Jota and CCV being the 2 permanent signings coming in? Michael McDonald, you have obviously never heard me singing, my man, but thank you for that. Anyway, there we go. How do you pronounce it though, Pete McGee? My French isn't great. And also we've been speaking about our left-back situation where Alexandro Bernabei may be coming in as the next signing. They're talking about medicals. Celtic do their business privately. I would expect him just to be announced. JP is coming in to save my skin because he speaks much better French than me. What I was going to say about French though, or France, or France rather, is you know how sometimes you've got this kind of like bucket list or a wish list, JP, people you would love to interview, because that's my thing. I love interviewing people, and Cantona is on that list. Eric Cantona would be on my list. I used to love Ginola, even though he gave us the knockback when he almost signed for Celtic, which gave us that famous "Can he do it on a wet Tuesday night at Brockville" quote from Fergus McCann. But that's not what we're talking about. You are going to link in this famous song. First of all, can you pronounce or can you translate "Don't Leave Me" to French?
Ne me quitte pas.
There you go. This is a well-known song. I've got to say, culturally, I have been devoid of any knowledge until you have enlightened me. How can you connect that to Celtic, JP?
Well, I was in the middle of, before I got cut off there, I was in the middle of talking about the Nick Wood and the Heriot Watt Edinburgh University's Celtic Supporters Club. A mouthful of a Celtic support, of a CSC, if ever there was one, but that's the bus I used to get on from Edinburgh when I was a student at Napier. Myself and my friend Michael joined this supporters club, and I was just saying, I'll finish that off. Nick told us on the way to Lyon that we were staying in Hotel Celtic. He booked us into Hotel Celtic, and I couldn't believe it when we actually arrived at the front door and above the Hotel Celtic. I was like, no way. A stroke of genius from Nick. I've got a picture of it. I'll post it afterwards, But yeah, that supporters club, met some really, really great people, and still keep in touch with them. Still see a lot of them at the games. There's people that go home and away still, like say Vicky McLean, Lesia, and Holly. There's a bunch of folk that you, if you're a regular at away games, you would see these folk. They're always sitting together. They always get tickets together and stuff. But there was a guy, Brendan McGeever, who is from a family of brothers, Brendan, Jamie, and Daniel. And by the way, Daniel got back to me, said he'd love to do it. A
superb
session. So So Brendan messaged me last week and just said, really enjoy watching you on Acsom. Here's a link. I managed to squeeze Paul McStay into a conversation about the song Nimakita Pa by Jacques Brel, and I listened to the link and it was just it was an amazing story, which again should probably post the link and reply to the Twitter post today so that people can hear it. But what he said, how he managed to get Paul McStay in was when Paul McStay was rumoured to be leaving Celtic, and people of a certain vintage will remember this. And the chat was that he was going that summer, and did he throw his top into the crowd? I mean, I think I was maybe. I definitely wasn't a season ticket holder. Not many people were in 1992. Was it 92?
It would have been 92, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember before I say what Brendan experienced. I remember being on holiday in Tenerife, and I had a pair of Celtic shorts on, and the guy next to me was listening to a radio, and he said to me, "Wee man, Paul McStay signed a new deal." And I went, but I remember going bananas and running into the sea and celebrating because Paul McStay was staying. And it's a vivid memory, because I mean, Paul McStay was head and shoulders the best player at Celtic. You know, like could easily have played at a higher level, and you know, some might say he should have, but I don't necessarily agree with that, because he's a Celtic legend as a result. But Brendan was watching the highlights of a sports scene or whatever, and they put together a compilation of McStay's finest Celtic moments and soundtracked it with Dusty Springfield's version of Nimakita Pa in English. And he just says he was 8 years old, and he describes on this programme how it emotionally affected him, because, you know, he'd never heard that song before, and just the music and the footage of McStay, you know, pirouetting around the football pitch, spreading, you know, his usual kind of unbelievable passes all over the pitch, the maestro as he was. And that song stuck with him. And then he goes on to talk about what he did with that song later in life with regards to romancing his now wife, Caroline. And it's just a really nice story. And I just wanted to mention it because Brendan's a great guy. So is his brothers. And then you had a mad, completely ridiculous conversation with his older brother, having had no connection.
I know.
To this or me or anything.
It's weird. We were chatting the other night, JP, and you were telling me the story, and I said, you're not going to believe this, but I've had a discussion with Jamie McGeever, the brother, a few years back, because we were brought up in the same village, out in the mining villages, and I couldn't believe that, you know, I'd already discussed Celtic and Acsom with one of the McGeever brothers, and there we have it. You knew them, and bizarre. So we were bringing that story up, but I'm just actually scrolling through. There we go. I found it. I thought it would be in there. This is Celtic Wiki picks page for Paul McStay. I'm going to bring this up because this is a picture of him throwing the jersey into the crowd, right? You can always rely on the wiki. Love the Celtic Wiki. Great job, everybody. So that's the picture there in the middle, JP, where he's throwing the jersey into the crowds. He's just throwing it into the jungle. He's throwing it into the jungle.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there was a Celtic View feature later on where the guy who got the jersey is getting interviewed and all the rest of it. But before we get on to the jersey, I'm just going to answer a comment coming in from a long-standing contributor to the show. Feed the Bear, welcome back. Great to see you, sir. And you are talking about someone who has been banned from commenting on a Celtic State of Mind. And I'm going to bring it up just to put it into context, because Studs mentions it as well. Fine sentiments, Feed. Yeah, there are fine sentiments that we all need to stick together, and I totally agree with that. But we need to ensure, or I have a responsibility, that if any of the Acsom contributors are being abused in the comment section, and that abuse goes to the point where it's unacceptable, then I need to take action, and I need to protect the Acsom contributors. Without giving you the exact comment that was made, it was unacceptable, and unfortunately I've got to protect the contributors on Acsom, so I've had to do that. But I mean, I've spoken to Monty directly via email, not since this event, I don't have an issue with anybody who comments on this. I thank everybody for their support. But at the same time, I need to ensure that the people in Acsom are safe. It's not nice to be abused. I've had it in spades fairly recently as well. So yeah, we do need to stick together. I totally agree with that sentiment. However, if somebody's been abused on here, I've also got to protect them. So let's move on to the actual jersey that Paul McStay threw in, or that style of jersey that he threw into the crowd, JP, because I guess this is just a bit of serendipity, but you actually came across that jersey this week. You've got one of the jerseys, haven't you?
I have. It was a bit of a late night frivolous purchase on eBay, but I had that top when I was younger with the People sponsor, and I think that was, I either gave that one to one of my neighbours, and I think it was Paul Wilkins. So if you're watching, Paul, and you still have that top, it's probably worth a fortune. But I managed to get this actual top, and
without the sponsor,
and it's in mint condition. And to have it again, obviously it's been like 28 years or something, 20, maybe even 30 years actually. This is 30 years since I had that top, which is terrifying. To have it again in really, really great condition, no baubles, badges in good nick. I was absolutely delighted. So it's another one for the collection.
It is a belter. What I remember about it, JP, it was at the time where that and the away jersey had this strange badge. It was like a velvety texture on the front, but it was like a bit of sandpaper on the back. So you almost had to wear a t-shirt under it to protect your body parts from bleeding. It was particularly if you're out for a jog, which back in those days I did on a regular basis, far more regularly than I do now. JP, it's been brilliant. Once again, we got through about a quarter of the things we were going to speak about, but I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. As I say, let's make sure that we do stick together as Celtic fans, because positivity is key. We're going to keep doing what we do on A Celtic State of Mind. Join us on a daily basis. Get subscribing on our YouTube channel. As I said earlier, I can't give too much info away. We've got a massive announcement coming up for the charity weekender that's going to burst our fundraising through the £100,000 mark, JP, this Christmas. I'm sure it will. Quite an original idea, and I cannot wait to get stuck in about that as well. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.